Today for our daily cancellation, Maxine Waters enters the ring. It may seem surprising that Maxine Waters has been canceled, I think maybe only once or twice in this segment before. She could, of course, be canceled every day, and that explains why she rarely is. It'd be sort of redundant to cancel her every time she deserves it. We have to pick our spots. The thing about Representative Maxine Waters is that she is equal parts stupid, evil, and racist. And this can make it especially difficult to figure out whether any particular thing she does or says or policy she proposes was motivated more by her stupidity, her wickedness, or her racism. Often it's an equal and equitable mix of all three. And I think that's probably the case here. Waters has proposed a plan to give Americans some help in making a down payment on their first homes. This may or may not sound like a good idea to you at first blush, but before you draw any conclusions, you have to remember this is Maxine Waters we're talking about here. This is the modern Democrat Party we're talking about. Their plans to help Americans are never plans to help all Americans. That's why, as a Politico headline puts it, the real purpose of this proposal is to, quote, close the racial wealth gap. Of course. Everything is always racial for these people. Just as there's only ever 6 degrees of separation between any Hollywood actor and Kevin Bacon, there's only ever at least, or at most, 2 degrees of separation between any Democratic policy proposal and their racial obsessions. It always comes back to that. Always. So let's read now from the Politico article to get the gist of this plan. It says a $10 billion proposal by House Financial Services Chair Maxine Waters would give homebuyers up to $25,000 for a down payment. President Joe Biden's top housing official, HUD Secretary Marcia Fudge, which is just a great name for a bureaucrat, says such assistance is a priority for the administration. Okay, pausing there for a second. $10 billion. Well, what's $10 billion between friends? There are reports this morning that Biden is about to unveil a $6 trillion budget. $6 trillion. Now, as Ben pointed out on Twitter, $6 trillion is actually $12 trillion when you factor in the COVID stimulus, his family's plan, etc. That's all of the proposed spending in just 6 months. He's proposing an average of $2 trillion a month he has proposed on average. By the end of his tenure at this rate, he'll have spent, I don't know, $96 trillion if my math is right, which it probably isn't. Either way, the fact remains, these are astronomical amounts of money. These are such large amounts of money that you can't even really call them amounts of money. These numbers are so large, they effectively don't exist. There's no way to conceptualize them. Biden is spending money as if there is no such thing as money. I would say he's spending money like it grows on trees, but we'd need more trees than exist on Earth to harvest this much. So $10 billion, that is pocket change, I suppose. But even so, it's a terrible plan for reasons that should already be clear, but will only become clearer as we keep reading. It says Waters' plan has triggered concern in the mortgage industry that because it would require lenders to identify and direct aid to first-generation buyers, those whose parents don't own homes. And by the way, I have no idea how they would even identify that group, and they don't really have any idea how they would either. There isn't some database out there, as far as I know, of Americans who've never bought homes before. Anyway, and it would also direct aid to socially and economically disadvantaged groups. The move is also stirring broader criticism about how much it would help buyers and whether it would even put them at risk. Quote, we are simply providing first-generation homebuyers, largely people of color, what white first-time homebuyers have been receiving for years in the form of the daddy down payment loan, family assistance that is almost never repaid, said David Dworkin, president and CEO of the National Housing Conference, an advocacy group. The plan with the most traction, the $10 billion proposal in a housing infrastructure bill by Waters, would give state housing finance agencies grants to award up to $20,000 in down payment assistance to first-generation homebuyers below a certain income threshold and up to $25,000 if the homebuyer is from a socially and economically disadvantaged group. Waters' bill includes the provision alongside massive investments in public housing and the National Housing Trust Fund. The bill defines socially disadvantaged homebuyers who would qualify for larger credit as individuals identifying as Black, Hispanic, Native American, or Asian American. But, quote, such presumption may be rebutted with credible evidence to the contrary, according to a discussion draft of the legislation. So there it is. If you didn't know any better, and you hear someone say that they want to help the socially disadvantaged, you might think that sounds like a fine idea. But then you learn that socially disadvantaged is just a slightly more sanitized way of saying anyone who isn't white. The plan here isn't so much to help black people or minorities, it's to not help white people. They are, after all, the only group left off the list. Even Asians are on the list of socially disadvantaged, but Asians have a higher median household income than whites in this country. Asians are doing better than white people, and by a pretty significant margin. Whites are, in fact, more, quote, disadvantaged than Asians. The fact that the Asians qualify for assistance and white people don't proves, if it wasn't clear already, that the real point here is simply to exclude whites because they're white. It's racist and illegal. The Constitution guarantees equal protection under the law regardless of race. Laws that dole out perks based on race while leaving whites in the cold are unconstitutional by definition. Now, the argument that activists give for this racist plan, as you heard, is that white people have been getting help from their parents on their down payments, and so it's only fair if black people get help from the government. The problem with that argument is, first of all, not all white people have parents who give them money to make down payments. Mine didn't. I've bought 3 homes. I don't own 3 homes, but we've moved, 3 times in the last 4 years, and I've bought homes in each place. I didn't get any help on any of those down payments. And besides, here's a concept that more people need to understand. The government is not your daddy. There are plenty of things that parents do or can do which the government can't do or shouldn't do. And anyway, whatever the government is doing, it is racist and illegal to favor certain groups based on race while excluding others on the same basis. Aside from the racial component, though, the whole idea of down payment assistance from the government is catastrophically awful on its own merits, even the race stuff aside. A pretty good general principle is this. If you can't afford to make a down payment on a home, then you can't afford the home. If you need $25,000 from daddy government in order to afford even just the down payment, how are you going to pay your mortgage going forward? What about utilities? HOA fees if you have them. Will you have money to fix a leaky pipe or a broken HVAC unit? Many expenses come with home ownership. Believe me, we're going through that right now as people just recently bought a home. Throwing people into homes they can't afford, all in the name of racial equity, is a disaster waiting to happen. Especially now as the housing market is challenging enough for buyers. It's very hard to find a house right now. Again, I know what I'm talking about, because the demand is through the roof, and the houses that are available are all more expensive than they'd be in a normal market, and they're getting more expensive every day. Now throw a bunch of homeowners or potential homeowners with a check from the government into the mix, and you just made it harder for buyers, not easier. More expensive, not more affordable. It's a bad idea on every level. Foolish, short-sighted, ridiculous, also racist. Exactly what we've come to expect from Maxine Waters and friends. And that is why she is today, of course, canceled. Well, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Matt Walsh Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.